York Times has published an explosive piece which touches on Donald Trump attempting to apparently fix the investigations against him. And yes, investigations meaning plural. There are multiple investigations against him, and in each one he has attempted to stack the deck in his favor. And I'll give you some of the highlights mentioned in this piece. So according to the Times, Trump called Matthew Whitaker, who was his acting attorney general, and asked whether Geoffrey Berman, a United States attorney for the Southern District of New York and a Trump ally, could be put in charge of the widening investigation. Now, this investigation had to do with the campaign contributions, the hush money payments that were made to Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels. And so the idea that he would get one of his allies to kind of oversee this investigation gives you a sense of where his head was at and how he was trying to kind of fix this in his favor. Now, here's the interesting part. Whitaker knew that Berman had recused himself from this whole investigation and essentially said, no, I can't do that because of his recusal. And Donald Trump soured on him immediately.
Of course he did. So this story leads to the two fatal flaws of Donald Trump and why I said he never lasts the 4 years, and he's not going to. Because number one, he is deeply corrupt. He can't help himself. Now the entire spotlight of the world is on him. And everybody knows that he picked Matthew Whitaker because he was perceived to be a loyalist. That is when you would want to be most careful and not buttress that point of view. But he can't help himself. He's been a con man his whole life. So as soon as Whitaker comes in, he's like, okay, now why don't you fix that Southern District case against me and put my loyalist in there, Geoffrey Berman, and get him out, okay? Get that case out. Now that case is more important in a lot of ways than the Mueller investigation because that is a clear felony. It's violating campaign finance laws. His personal attorney, Michael Cohen, is going to prison for 3 years based on that. So that is monumentally important to him. And for him to try to interfere in that investigation is obstruction 101. You would think that he might do it in a more subtle way. No, he doesn't have a subtle bone in his body. And even if you're a supporter, you know that. And that's part of why you like him, okay? But so yes, that's now on top of the campaign finance violation, which was obvious to begin with, we now have clear obstruction. This is felony on top of felony.
It's amazing.
So look, I asked Bernie Sanders, and he says, look, I'm a judge in the case. If there's an impeachment and the Senate has to decide whether to throw him out of office, so I don't want to be too prejudicial here, but does it look like obstruction? Of course it does. Anybody can. So you don't need Mueller. We already have two super obvious and super important felonies right here on the record. And by the way, the New York Times story has more in a second. But then point number two is the second defining trait, lack of intelligence. You did, and no homework, spoiled little child. You didn't bother to find out if Berman had recused himself? You're asking your acting attorney general to commit an illegal act, and you didn't even bother to check to see if Berman had recused himself. How unbelievably stupid are you?
So this is now what, the 50th time that Donald Trump has soured on his allies, his friends, because they didn't carry out whatever mission he wants them to carry out in his favor. And so he sours on Whitaker immediately because he's not willing to put an ally in charge of this investigation. But here's the thing that I don't understand. The fact that he still has loyalists, the fact that he still has individuals who are willing to work for him, who are willing to, fight for him, knowing that if they make one small move in the wrong direction in Trump's perception, he will turn on them immediately.
Well, Anna, we talked about Gulliver in one of our members only sections, yes, right? And that power, man, it's precious.
Yes.
And so now Whitaker thinks, oh, no. First of all, Whitaker's chances of being attorney general in any way, shape, or form was non-existent before Trump. And Trump's like, this meathead will do whatever I ask of him. That's what he said publicly, right? So I'll pick him. But even he's not enough of a meathead for him to be like, yeah, but you're asking me A, to commit an obvious illegal act, and B, I can't even do it because Berman already turned it down because he recused himself. You're asking me to do something literally impossible. And then Trump's like, oh yeah, then I don't like you. So when is it gonna get through your thick skulls that he's gonna turn on you? He doesn't care about you. He doesn't care about his loyalists. He doesn't care about his friends, his attorneys. He doesn't care about anybody. And by the way, this goes all the way to his voters. They think, no, I know he's ripped off everybody in his past, Trump University, the Trump charity, so-called charity, and every Jeff Sessions and everyone. Sessions was the first senator back when it was deeply controversial to back Donald Trump. And what did he return that favor with? Threw him under the bus.
Yes.
And that's how he views you guys. You're the last sucker at the parade.
So before I get to the other giant part of this story, I do want to quickly comment on something regarding Jeff Sessions. So as we all know, Donald Trump was furious at the fact that Jeff Sessions had recused himself from the Russia investigation. And he was public about that. He tweeted about how horrible Sessions is for doing so. But he never fired Sessions until after the midterm elections, right? And so the reason why he didn't fire Sessions is because he was advised, and I think this was actually good advice, to avoid doing so, that it would be better if Sessions resigns on his own. So what did Trump do? According to the Times, Trump called his former campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, over the 4th of July weekend to ask him to pressure Sessions to resign. Lewandowski was non-committal and never acted on that request.
Even the meathead of meatheads, Corey Lewandowski, is smart enough to know that, hey, I can't randomly call the attorney general like some sort of thug and be like, hey, you know what? I think it's in your best interest to resign. Who the hell's Corey Lewandowski? He's not in the government.
Right.
Why would he be calling the attorney general and yelling at him to resign? That makes no sense at all. But Trump asks people to do things that are illegal and impossible all the time. And so the savvy guys like Lewandowski who only care about the power and the wealth go, sure, boss, of course, boss. I'll call him right after the barbecue, boss. Hangs up because I'm not gonna call him. He'll forget anyway, right?
Right.
And Whitaker, on the other hand, is a sweaty mess. He's like, oh my God, he wants me to do this. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Yeah, you can't do it. And so they better get these folks up in whether it's in front of prosecutors, most importantly, but eventually in front of Congress as well. Let's get them on the record and make sure you ask him these specific questions, because Whitaker said, oh no, he didn't ask me to interfere in the Mueller investigation. Now, I didn't talk about the Southern District of New York. He did have a vaguer answer on all the investigation. Let's bring him back. Let's ask him this specific question under penalty of law. And Whitaker, you think Trump's gonna have your back? No, he'll let you go to jail. He doesn't care about you, right?
So the second giant part of the story has to do with Donald Trump's lawyers reaching out to individuals like Paul Manafort and his former national security advisor, Michael Flynn. Now, both individuals were implicated in this Russia investigation. And as we know, they're facing the legal consequences of that. But according to the Times, one of Trump's lawyers also reached out to the lawyers for Manafort and Flynn to discuss possible pardons. The discussions raised questions about whether the president was willing to offer pardons to influence their decisions about whether to plead guilty and cooperate in the Mueller investigation. But there's a little bit more to this. Now, Giuliani was also somewhat involved. Behind the scenes, Giuliani was getting help from an individual named Kevin Downing, a lawyer for Manafort. Manafort had agreed to cooperate with the special counsel after being convicted of financial crimes in an attempt to lessen a potentially lengthy prison sentence. Downing shared details about prosecutors' lines of questioning with Giuliani.
Yeah, so that is highly unusual, but it is, that part I don't believe is illegal. So, Trump and Manafort's lawyers working together, okay, it gives you a sense of, because Trump said, oh, I don't get, Manafort's a totally different case, it has nothing to do with me. Because, and a lot of it, of Manafort's case is separate. It's about how he had deals with the Russian-backed Ukrainian oligarchs, etc. Okay, and so if Trump didn't care about it, why are the two lawyers cooperating? Unless Manafort also has evidence on Trump. Because if Manafort doesn't have evidence on Trump, you think Trump's gonna give a damn? He ain't gonna care at all. But the part about talking to their lawyers about pardons,
that's huge.
Obstruction of Justice 101, again, clear obstruction of justice, clear felony, gotta go. I mean, look, if at this point, so I get it, they wanna wait for the Mueller report, but you don't need the Mueller report. If the Mueller report comes out and the Democrats do not go for impeachment, they're playing politics. And it's a total bizarre but classic Democratic move. We will not pursue something that would help us and is against our opponent because we're too scared. And that would be the only reason why. Because if you actually care about the law, you gotta make sure that the president is not above the law. And these appear to be very clear violations of the law. So they should pursue impeachment now, no matter what.
What I found interesting, and it goes to your point about Trump not being a very smart person. So Mueller found out about how Trump's lawyers were speaking to Manafort's lawyers about a potential pardon. And it really upset him, which is, remember that whole story came out about how Mueller was no longer buying into this notion that Manafort was cooperating with the investigation. And this is why, because behind the scenes, you have the lawyers for Trump working with Manafort's lawyers and kind of working out a potential pardon.
Yes. I'll give you something if you don't testify, is the definition of obstruction of justice. So the only question now that remains is, are they gonna do anything about it?
I don't think so. Look, that's what concerns me the most about all of this. I think that even if something giant comes out of this investigation, even if they prove that there's significant money laundering through this investigation, which is what you and I are hoping Mueller is really looking into, Republicans have supported and backed Donald Trump no matter what. And you need Republicans to have a backbone in order to push for impeachment. They support him. I mean, Lindsey Graham talking about launching an investigation into the investigation. And Lindsey Graham's not the only one. He thinks this is a completely politically biased investigation into Trump. This isn't about a politically biased investigation. You have Republicans investigating him. Mueller is a lifelong Republican. Rod Rosenstein, lifelong Republican. This is not a Democratic witch hunt. This is looking into some serious crimes, potential crimes that the President of the United States committed.
Yes, well, look, even if they don't think the Republicans are gonna vote with them, Democrats should pursue it because it's the right thing to do. Because we live in a democracy and no one is above the rule of law. On the go, don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.